Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Leanne.
Welcome to the Empowered Poly Podcast, where we give you the tools to help you feel more empowered
in your polyamorous and consensually non-monogamous relationships
by sharing what we've learned as relationship coaches and as individuals.
Empowered Poly is LGBTQ2IA+, alternative lifestyle, and kink friendly.
Thank you for joining us
And enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to episode 30 of the Empowered Poly Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about entitlement in relationships. So, let's start with how we came about the idea of this topic. What sparked our interest in this? Do you remember that?
Do you remember it? Yes, I think so. I think I brought it up as a topic that came up in a session with a client, right? In our coaching session, and they were talking about feeling upset that they weren't receiving what they felt entitled to in their relationship.
And that happens a lot in the work that we do, especially with people that are new to the world of non-monogamy, right? Because there's some sort of programming around, the mindset is that if we're married, then we're entitled to certain things because of that marriage, entitled to certain aspects of our partner, and which we'll get into in a bit.
Well, and it's not just marriage. It might be friendship. It might be family relationships. It might, it's across the board. All relationships have this problem in terms of, people feeling entitled to certain privileges.
Right.
And special treatment, which is part of the definition of entitlement when we're talking about it in not a legal term, but in relationships.
Right. Yeah. So I think this is a good place to talk about that too, is what is the definition of entitlement, right? At least the type of entitlement that we're referring to. And I'm going to just keep talking. I'm just going to keep talking until my Google pops up and I can read it. So technically there are three types of entitlement, right? There are three definitions for the word entitlement. The fact of having a right to something, the amount to which a person has a right, and then the last one, which is the one we're going to be talking about, the belief that one is inherently deserving of privileges or special treatment. So when we were researching the topic, we started talking about what's the difference between like entitlement and respect, right? Because there are certain things that we deserve from the people in our lives. Yeah. But are we entitled to those things?
Right. So it's a difference between entitlement and deserving, right? Entitlement is the idea that I am owed this because of what I've provided or the status that I have, right? And deserving is I deserve to have this, which means I can find it in certain relationships, choose the relationships maybe that I'm receiving that in, and not choose the relationships that I'm not, right?
Because we do deserve certain things like respect, autonomy, to be treated kindly, compassionately, right? We deserve those things, to be loved, to be honored, for our we deserve self-respect, right? We deserve all of those things. But what we're talking about is a sense of entitlement to somebody else, right? Simply because of the position that we have in their life.
Right. So I am your mother, therefore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. That position gives us a sense of privilege. And that, frankly, is a problem. It's problematic. Right. Yeah. And we're looking at it that way. And it's when we were talking about this the other night, I had a hard time finding a situation where entitlement was okay.
Yeah.
So hard that I couldn't find a situation in relationships where entitlement is okay. You mentioned a mother. I'm your mother, therefore. That feels problematic to me.
Yeah. Right? One of the things that comes up for me around this topic is I've had a lot of people in my life who have felt entitled to me in various ways. And as a people pleaser in recovery, it was a very hard nut for me to crack to actually start to question their entitlement. So that can be part of my, challenges in my relationships is actually disbelieving the entitlement. I'm so used to it and I kind of normalized it, I think.
Can you give us an example?
Um, yeah, I mean, time. So, I have a free day that I'm looking at, and various people in my life would pop up and say, "What are you doing today?" And I would say, "Nothing." Now, that right there is me not advocating for myself. Right? That's saying that what I had planned for myself, which might have been to, I don't know, look at cat videos all day long, uh, wasn't
So
okay.
fun.
It is super fun. Wasn't okay. It wasn't anything of note or worthiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying, I've got some things that I'm going to do for myself today, or I'm going to watch cat videos today and owning that, or whatever I'm going to do, I said nothing. And that would, open the door to them in their mind. And they would say, well, great, I need you to this, that, or the other thing, or I want you to this, that, or the other thing with me or for me. And I've had to really try to lean into, I've got a full day planned, even if it's just things I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the entitlement then is the other person coming to you and saying, well, since you're not doing anything, I want you to do these things
Mm-hmm.
or do these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you push back and say, no, I'm not going to do those things because I don't want to do anything today. That's my day. That's what's
Mm-hmm.
on my calendar is nothing, and I'm going to keep it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then the entitlement comes into play and becomes problematic when somebody comes back and says, yeah, but I, I'm your whatever, and so I'm telling you to do it. I
Right.
expect you to do it,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right. And so that's where it becomes an issue. That's
And
where it
sometimes
becomes
they're not
challenging.
even that articulate about it. It's very
No.
subtle. It's more of
Oh,
a, it can be emotional manipulation at that point where they become rejected or they become angry or they become sad, that
have
you are not willing to step into that for them. Um, so, that piece of playing the guilt card or the anger card or the frustration card or whatever. Um, and when I say playing the card, that's kind of disregarding the validity of the feeling that might come up for them, which, is perfectly valid. They're entitled to their feelings. But also, when we're talking about problematic behavior being the seed of those feelings, I kind of get my nose out of joint about it. So,
mhm.
so when they're feeling those things and they let you know that they're feeling those things when you say I don't want to, that means that they're still in the entitlement place, right? They're still expecting you to cave, to comply, to acquiesce. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you say that because one of the examples that we talked about was veto power. So for those of
Hmm.
you listening that don't know what veto power is, in non-monogamous relationships, um, veto power would be your partner being able to have a say in who, what, when, where, why, or how you do something with another partner. So just a really super basic example of that is that you're dating somebody that your nesting partner doesn't like, and so your nesting partner says, "I want you to stop dating them," and then so you do, even though you don't want to stop dating them. So
Hmm.
that's an example of veto power, and it's an inherently entitled perspective,
Right. Right.
right? And so that's a really good example of that. Now, another good example of the way that entitlement can show up in an insidious way, or maybe even an unconscious way, not insidious, but an unconscious way,
Hmm.
is so let's say you have this. You don't have a veto power talked about. You haven't talked about it. But every single time you go on a date with your this new partner,
Mm-hmm.
your nesting partner makes it very difficult and challenging for you to do that. Maybe they're late coming home from work because something came up at the office, so you have to wait another hour, while they get home before you can leave because of the kids. Or maybe they have a meltdown before you go about something unrelated to your date, right? Now, that is a form of entitlement, and they may not be aware of that. It might be an unconscious thing, but what they're in my experience, because I've been on both sides of that particular fence,
Mm-hmm.
my experience is that when I was feeling that way, and if I was really honest with myself and I was unpacking it, it was because I didn't want them to go. I was
Mm,
entitled to their time. And
right.
if I was having a problem or if I was having an issue, I expected them to drop everything they were doing and help me. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a form of entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
So yeah, that's interesting. When you first said it, I was kind of like, well, if something came up at the office, that's legitimate. However, if you have that entitlement script running subconsciously, the difference would be, oh, they're going on a date with so and so. I'm going to be an hour late because of something at the office, and I'm choosing to stay and take care of it, right? If there's a choice. Um, and I expect them to delay their plans, make other arrangements, whatever they're going to do on their end. They have to deal with
Cancel,
it.
whatever.
Cancel, right?
Right.
Um, Another way to do that in a better, healthier way. I'm going to say better and healthier because we're talking about problematic behaviors. Um, would be to say something's come up at the office. If there is no choice and I have to stay, I would then problem solve or help to problem solve or make a suggestion to my partner. I know you have a date tonight, and I also know that our sitter, is 5 minutes away. So could you perhaps call them because I'm stuck at the office and I'm in a meeting right now and I can't do it? You know, so that there's a bit of a ownership of the problem and a bit of teamwork in terms of solving it, and even making suggestions is helpful, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you like the partner that they're dating. It just means that you respect their time,
Right.
right? You don't
That's,
have to
that's a
like them.
really, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good point. And further to that, what I was saying about the whole, being late every time you have a date, it's the consistency of it.
It's
If
a
you're doing it
pattern.
if it's a pattern, every single
Hmm.
time you have a date with one of your partners or whatever, that's not them, they're late coming home, or they're uncommunicative, or they're difficult in their communication, right? Or they're like, they're disregarding of your needs and your time, right?
Hmm.
Those are all signs of unconscious entitlement.
Hmm.
And it's not gender specific, because I've seen it happen on both ends of
Nope.
all ends. All I've seen it happen with all genders, and I've experienced having that impact me, and I've also experienced being the person that does have that sense of entitlement. So I
Hmm.
think that's something to be really, really aware of, right? Especially if you are in a hierarchical relationship dynamic, even if it's agreed upon, there's still, and maybe this is a different topic, but
I need
go
to
ahead.
unpack hierarchy.
Okay. All right. Go for it.
Just really quickly.
Good.
Uh,
I know you got this thing that you're really high on right now, which I love actually. So go for it. Share.
okay, so the fellow who proposed that there were in poly relationships descriptive hierarchical relationships and prescriptive hierarchical relationships. Descriptive meaning there are certain circumstances in our life which means that this relationship takes priority over others. And prescriptive meaning we've agreed that our relationship is more important than all other relationships. Um, Said recently that he no longer will support his own coined phrase descriptive hierarchy because he's come to understand that hierarchy as a type of relationship is inherently unhealthy. And so he said, hierarchy means that someone has status and therefore authority over someone else. And whenever someone is controlling another person, that is not what we want in a healthy relationship. So, what he went on to say was, what I meant by descriptive hierarchy is prioritizing. Prioritizing is absolutely okay. We should all be doing it as normal functioning people in the world, as adulting people in the world. We should be prioritizing what matters to us most first. And that can take the form of, hey, I'm a parent, and so these children take priority over everything else. So that can feel like, you're prioritizing your marriage over your other relationships if you share home, parents, work, money, household responsibilities, etc., family, taking care of elderly relatives, whatever. It can look to an outside partner as if that is a hierarchical relationship. However, it can be very much about prioritizing what matters to you first, right? If you're taking care of an elderly parent, and they have a problem, you might have to cancel your date. It's not necessarily going to happen. To an outside person, that might feel dismissive or unreasonable. But we're all actually entitled. We have the right as autonomous beings to prioritize what matters to us most. That's all I was going to say about that.
Good. So the difference then is that it's a difference. It's not. It's basically just about prioritizing what matters to you in your life, which we do on a daily basis, every day, with everything, right?
So what started this
come up a lot in the poly world, right?
Yeah. What started this was, you said, even if you have a hierarchical relationship, they're not entitled to X, Y, or Z from you.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, let's get away from the hierarchical relationships in total, and let's recognize that we can have a nesting partner relationship, an anchor partner relationship. We can have, all kinds of different types of relationships that aren't hierarchical, but are prioritized for other reasons. Yes?
Right. Gotcha. Okay. I understand. And so in doing that, then does that help take away some of the sense of entitlement?
I think entitlement can still occur in those relationships, right? Non-hierarchical relationships, for sure. We can still feel entitled because we live with someone, because we are their only partner right now.
Right.
There's lots of times where that's come up in session too. Well, I'm their only partner right now, so why are they spending their weekend doing this, that, or the other thing?
Then let's maybe talk about the different ways that we've seen entitlement show up.
Sure.
In relationships. So time is one of them, right? So I'm entitled to your time, like you were talking about. I'm not doing anything today. Well, I want you to do this, right? So that's time, right? Or I want you to spend time with me and not with them. And I'm your husband, so I deserve that, right? That's my right because I'm your husband, right? Sex is another way, right? This is a big one. This is a huge one, actually. So we've heard a lot in the work that we do and in the community as a whole that there's a mindset out there that says that if you are married or in a nesting partnership, that you are entitled to sex with your partner. And you're entitled to, and your partner should be giving that to you whether they want to or not. So much so that there's actually, I've heard a term for it. One of my clients gave me the term the boyfriend tax.
Oh.
Have you ever heard that?
No.
Yeah, that's what they call it. They call it the boyfriend tax. So
that makes me really uncomfortable.
Right. So it's a sense of entitlement to somebody else's sex, to having sex with a partner, right? Because the only reason that you feel that way is because you are their primary partner, or you are their nesting partner, or you are just their partner, or you've had sex with them once, so therefore you're entitled to it forever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's a huge one. That's a really
You
big one.
know,
So
I have to I have to say
yeah,
something. 26 years ago in Canada, marital rape was outlawed. That's not very
just
long.
26 years ago.
Yeah. And the US law was changed in some states in 1974. It became a crime nationwide in 1993. That's pretty crazy when you think about it. And when I said that first statistic about Canada, I'm not sure when that article was written, so don't quote me on that.
Right. The
But I
point
mean, they're
though is
all
that
they're in the same kind of ballpark.
yeah, the point is that until recently, marital spousal rape wasn't a crime,
Yeah,
right? That's
shocking.
entitlement. It's shocking. It's a shocking level of entitlement, but
Yeah,
it's happened for the majority of human civilization, and it's only just recently that we're starting to recognize that yeah, that's a problem.
yeah.
And so from so from the perspective of the person that said that's the boyfriend tax, we can see how that can be problematic, right? Because they're saying that that's something that I have to do for my boyfriend, whether
Hmm.
I want to or not. I have to do that because they are entitled to me in that way because they're my partner or they're my
Hmm.
boyfriend, right?
Yeah.
And is that consent?
No.
No, it's not. It's not. It
Mm-mm.
certainly isn't enthusiastic or even curious consent.
Mm-mm.
It's just like, and I'm the sort that I mean, when I was having sex on a regular basis, I didn't want to do it if somebody didn't want to do it with me. If I had the slightest inkling that they were just doing it as a favor or because they felt they had to,
Hmm.
I completely became disinterested in it.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody doing me any favors. I don't want anybody doing something for me, and that especially something so intimate and so intimate that I don't want them doing it if they don't want to be there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And entitlement to someone's body
Mhm,
can be sexual. It can be about what they wear.
mhm,
It can be about where they take their body, how they display it, how they decorate it, whether they have tattoos or piercings or whatever, what they do with any part of their body for themselves. We can, as a partner, we can have preferences. We can have, we can weigh in on it. We can definitely, give our opinion if we're asked, or, if someone says, do you like this or that. Um, but whether a woman shaves her legs or not, all of those things, we don't have control over someone's body, right? And if we do, we need to stop doing that. Unless it's an agreed upon consensual thing that you're doing together, right? Where I would say to you as my partner, this kind of is kinky and turns me on, so you can tell me how to dress, or you can tell me how you want my hair, or you can tell me whatever, and I'll do it, right? But that's consent.
that doesn't, but that doesn't mean that you're entitled to always do it because that person can change their
Mm.
mind at any moment. They could say, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not feeling it.
Consent is ongoing. Yes.
Consent is always ongoing, right?
That
And
doesn't mean
entitlement,
it doesn't mean consent once given is perpetual. It means that you have to keep checking in, checking in, checking in.
and and that works both ways. So if you
Hmm.
find yourself in a situation where you're uncomfortable doing something and you're saying yes, then check in with yourself, right?
And
Why am I
say
saying yes
no,
to
or
this?
I don't know.
Or because your partner is not entitled to that from you if you're not feeling that. That is
Hmm.
not something that you if that's something that you choose to no longer engage in, you can stop doing it at any point,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Sometimes we have the situation where a partner will feel entitled to have sex with you and your other partner,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's not okay.
Nope.
That's not anything that you have anything to do with. That's a relationship that's different than yours. You can have a relationship with each individual if they want to, right?
So somebody might be sitting there asking, well, why isn't that okay?
Mm.
Right? Well, the reason that's not okay is because there's no privilege, there's no inherent privilege there for you.
Hmm.
There's no, you don't have the right to somebody else's body. You don't have the right to somebody else's sex simply because they're having sex with your partner. That's why it's not okay. And it's not consensual.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And,
Even
and
if they even if they acquiesce to stay in the relationship, like this is a condition of dating this person, um,
still,
it's still not consensual. So when we're talking about consent, there is sort of a line where, we draw it between the four types of consent. The bottom two aren't really consent. One is, you know, we are afraid of consequences, and so we'll comply.
Mhm.
That's compliance, not consent. And the last is full on coercion, under threat of loss of something, which could be the loss of the relationship. So, you know, depending on the
If you
severity,
don't
it
do
might
this
be
for me, I
coercion.
will leave you.
Right,
Right?
right, right.
Right? Right. And that's I think that's a whole other Oprah, really.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So another piece of this puzzle is information, right? In our
Mm,
work, we hear this quite a bit, right? And so what do we mean by information? Well, information can include access to your social media, your email, your text, your phone. Information can also include access to your meta, so your partner's personal information,
mhm,
stuff that they might have shared with your partner, et cetera, right? So that's all under that umbrella of information. We see in our work, we see a lot of people that say, well, I mean, I read their phone, right? And I was entitled to that because, well, I pay the phone bill. No, no, you're not entitled to that because you pay the phone bill.
mhm,
You're not entitled to that because you're their partner or their husband or their spouse. You're not entitled to that for any fucking reason,
mhm.
right? That's an invasion of somebody's privacy.
And the privacy of the person
100%.
whose messages you're reading, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Mhm,
So what you can do in that case is you can say, "Hey, are you open to sharing that message with me?" And if they say no, then you've got your answer. And
and if
if
they
they
say
say
yes,
yes,
they
but let
should
me check with my
yes.
partner, my other
Ding ding.
partner, then that's a conversation that you need. That's a situation that you need to navigate through. But making the assumption, again, the assumption that because of your privilege in somebody's life, that you're entitled to that information, or you're entitled to see their social media posts, or you're entitled to see the nudes that they're sharing with other people. It's just it's not okay.
Right,
And
right.
and yeah,
And
so
there's even more like sort of I'm entitled to hear the details of your date. I've had clients whose partners insisted on like almost a repeated play by play of what happened. Where did they touch you? How did they kiss you? How long were you, making out before they took off your clothes? Who took off whose clothes? That kind of stuff.
and it's okay. So let's talk about that for a second because some people that's a kink for them, right? Hot wifing and there's other
Hmm.
sorts of so some people have that kind of a kink, and that is fine. Having that kink is totally fine as long as everybody who's involved in the situation
Hmm.
gives consent for that information to be shared. For
Right.
instance, if you're a male and you have a female identifying partner, and that female identifying partner has a relationship with another male partner or a penis owner, and you ask your female partner how big is his dick, it's really technically she needs to be getting permission from him to share that information with you because
Hmm.
that's none of your business and you are not entitled to know that, right?
And then on top of that, why? Why are you asking? Is it something that will turn you on to know, or is it a comparison thing?
Right.
Men tend to
Is it
be
a way?
very comparative. Well, not just men. people of all genders tend to be very comparative about our bodies, size of things, genitalia, etc. How do things, fit together in the puzzle of our bodies? But that could be quite a you know, challenging piece of information to have, even if you think you wanted it.
Mhm.
So I would be curious about my partner's reasons for asking.
Right. And that's a really good question. Why are you asking? Why do you think you're entitled to that information?
And why do you want to know? What
Why do you
what
want to know?
purpose is it serving for you to know that?
Right. I think ultimately, for me, and I know there's probably a couple of other things we want to talk about where entitlement is concerned, but ultimately, entitlement is one of those those ideologies, those thoughts, those I don't even know. I don't think it's a feeling; it's a thought. It's one of those things that comes up for us when we feel afraid, when we're trying to be protective of something. I think it falls into that category of protectiveness. It's mine. It's my right. I own it.
Mm.
I'm entitled to it. You know,
And the
it's like
fear might be coming
the,
from a place of like losing status, losing power, right?
exactly
Not having
losing,
power.
not having power. Right. Exactly. Losing a sense of your masculinity or being seen as somehow, a bitch or, less of a man or, in a woman's case, maybe it's maybe there's some trauma there. Maybe there's trauma, whatever, regardless of what your gender is. Right. But the fact of the matter is that entitlement to me is about protection. Because every time I thought I was entitled to something, I was trying to control somebody else.
Mm. Hmm. Well, and there's also that sense of, and this came up interestingly with a client, with not the typical uh, gender norms of um, where the female, uh, the woman of the relationship, is the breadwinner, the major breadwinner, and the man in the relationship is the main caregiver of the children and stays home with them, stay at home dad. One of the objections that she had was he's using our money to go on dates with someone else. And
Oh,
I don't want to support that.
okay.
So I said,
Unpack that.
let's take a step back. And I said, flip the genders and then tell me that story again. And she was like, oh, 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 okay. Right. So, we can even have our own unconscious bias about our ownership of household money, right? Um, if we're the major breadwinner, we're paying the bills, like you said earlier, I'm entitled to your phone. Um, you don't get money from me to go on your dates. It's not, that person is a partner in your world.
But another question you could also ask is, would you feel the same way if they were going for coffee with a friend?
Right. Yeah.
Would you feel the same way if they were going for coffee with a family member?
Yeah. Well, and in this case, it was a little bit more to it just because there had been quite a rupture in terms of how the relationship started.
Mhm.
It was
Right.
not ethical and it was not consensual. So,
Sure.
there's some pain and resentment. So,
Mm. Right. Which could also lead to entitlement,
mm,
resentment, envy. All of those things can lead to a
yeah,
sense of entitlement, right? I don't,
yeah,
that person's got a nicer car than I do, so I don't want you seeing them anymore. And
yeah,
I'm entitled to make that decision because I'm your husband and I'm the breadwinner and you don't have a job,
mm,
right? That's abusive. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
So
That's just
what we came
downright
to,
abusive.
and this is something, a suggestion for people if the money issue is a problem.
Mhm.
If you were dating somebody that I didn't like, that I, was really resentful of, and you were spending our shared money on that person, I might feel the same way, right? So, how do you deal with that? I would say look at the budget together, make a budget that is discretionary for whatever purpose for each of you monthly, and that's what they can use, right? And they can use it for whatever they want. If it's dates, it's dates. If it's ice cream sandwiches, it's ice cream sandwiches, So That's just a more equitable way of looking at, okay, here's what's coming in, here's what's going out, here's what's left over. What are we going to do with that? We have to put some away. And then we have our discretionary fund. And we're going to
Hmm.
divide that equally, right? Here's
And you can
yours,
spend it on
here's mine.
whatever you want,
Yeah,
or whomever you want, right?
yeah.
That's a good idea. So fundamentally, what is the reason that we decided to have this conversation and do this particular episode?
Well, I think because it's a running theme throughout a lot of our coaching practice, that people struggle with, and and we want to be prioritized by someone, right? That's okay. That desire is natural. What we turn it into is a sense of entitlement. And that to me is disregarding the other person's autonomy and trying to control rather than allowing the relationship to authentically show up as it is and making decisions accordingly around that. So if my partner is deprioritizing our relationship consistently and the pattern is that, then I can decide, do I want this relationship? Right? Do I want to stay in this? Is there
Right.
something that I could be talking to them about, expressing, advocating for that I'm not doing to give them more information so that they would know that I would like that to change, right? If I've done all of the work that I can do on that end of things, we can't control other people's actions nor tell them what to prioritize. That's up to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So for me, I think it's just helping people figure this out without turning into the sort of, well, I'm the wife, or I'm the husband, or I'm the breadwinner, or I'm the longest partner that you've had, so I should get special consideration, special treatment, right?
Hmm. Right.
That doesn't help bring connection about or authenticity.
Right. Um, so one actually, it's interesting because one of the things that came up for me while I was listening to you talk was having the feeling, having the sense or the thought that you're entitled to something isn't necessarily a bad thing. What's bad about it is acting on it, is thinking that that is actually right. Because maybe what you can do is the next time you think to yourself, well, it's my right to have this from my partner, or it's my right to read my partner's messages or tell my partner, what parts of their body they can show to whom, right? It's my right. Next time you ask yourself this question, what makes it my right? Well, and if the answer is anything other than, well, actually, if the answer, oh, fuck, I'm struggling here. It, it isn't your right. It's not your right. It's not your right to tell them what to do or have access to any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if the word right pops up in your vocabulary when you're thinking about your partner, then I would suggest maybe you get a little curious as to why you feel that way and where that might be coming from. What's the narrative there? What's the programming telling you? And
Mm-hmm.
maybe you're afraid of something. Maybe you're scared of something that you're not looking at or not getting curious about enough.
Yeah,
Um,
you're probably feeling powerless in some way.
yeah. Or maybe you're feeling not valued.
Yeah.
That's a big one, right? Maybe you're
Mm-hmm.
feeling like this person isn't spending enough time with me. So maybe what you're really feeling is envy and not entitlement, but you're turning it
Mm-hmm.
into entitlement as a way to keep control of the situation, as opposed to just
Mm-hmm.
being honest and saying, fuck, you know what? I'm feeling like I have a right to you in some capacity, and that just doesn't, that's not okay.
Well, and saying also, you know what, I recognize that this is hard for me to be vulnerable and ask for what I want from you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot
Yeah.
easier to say, as your wife, you should be treating me like this, and this. And if you're not, I'm leaving you, right? How about trying a different approach? As a human being in a relationship with you, these are the things that I value and need. And I think we really need to work on those things. And if we can't, then I might have to make decisions about what I'm doing with my time and where I'm putting my energy, right? So it's a lot more of a, we can work on this and in these ways and help this relationship continue, or find out that it's not, in alignment with each other. That's fine too.
So what you're saying then is that don't use your status in that person's life as a reason to expect certain behaviors or expect certain activities or whatever, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, activities, that's the other one, isn't it? That's one that comes
Yeah.
up a lot in our
Yeah.
coaching. People want exclusivity for certain activities, intimate activities, social,
Right.
right?
Places.
You've encountered that, right?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. I mean, I, to be quite blunt about it, I've had a couple of clients say, well, I thought that this particular sex act was ours and ours alone, you know,
Hmm.
and now I find out that you're doing it with other people. And
Hmm.
so unless you have an agreement about that, then that's not the case. You're not entitled to that. And even if you do have and I know this is a point of contention for a lot of people out there in the world, but even if you do have an agreement about it, even if you do have an agreement in place that says that we will only do this, we'll only have anal sex with each other. Okay, that's
Hmm.
great. But just understand that that's still not an entitlement. You're still not entitled to that person's butt,
Or body.
or body. They
Yeah.
can do whatever they want to with it. You might not like it,
Hmm.
but you're not entitled to it. It doesn't belong to you. It's not something that's not your right to have it.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Mhm. And so I think on the flip side of that too, places, things, activities and stuff, it's really important that you don't make assumptions. It's
Mm.
really important that you ask if there's a specific restaurant or whatever that you like going to and you need that to feel special to you. Okay, that can be a reasonable request, sure. And I would say make the request and then negotiate with your partner through that situation. And if your partner isn't willing to honor that request, then maybe it's time to get curious and say, well, what other ways can I feel valued? What other ways can I feel important and special in this relationship that don't require my partner to make sacrifices that they're not willing to make?
And go watch our episode on the desire to feel special.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
Um,
requests
but
are fine. Agreements are absolutely fine, because agreements are because you both want and value those things. So
eh,
agreements do change though, right? And when it's unsustainable or unreasonable in practice, that's when they change.
right. And it's also important to understand that you can have boundaries and standards. Nobody's saying don't have boundaries and standards here, but don't use those boundaries and standards as a way to to step into privilege,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So can we go back to the sex thing for a minute, for
Yeah, we can
example?
always go back to sex. Yeah.
So one of the things that comes up frequently is um, barrier-free sex. Some people like to call it fluid bonding. I prefer to use the term barrier-free. So barrier-free sex, often people will do this with certain partners or one partner that they have known for a while, that they trust, that maybe they're married to or nesting with, or maybe they're not, right? But that they want to experience that with, and they have agreed to certain protocols that allow them to feel safe about it, right? And they will not do that with other partners. Um, and sometimes then they will alter that agreement because of behavior that their partner enters into with someone else. So they have an activity with somebody else that's intimate. Maybe they exchange fluids with somebody that they don't know very well or didn't see the testing of or whatever, right? And so that agreement has to change now because the the person who like say I'm the person who has the partner that I'm barrier free with, and they do that. So I would then want to change the protocols, the practices, and use condoms moving forward until testing has been done after 3 months so that we know that we're good to go again, right? Um, and if they introduce a new partner in the meantime, another new partner that's maybe someone that they don't know the history of, or someone who's had many multiple partners themselves that I don't feel safe with in any way, then I get to say, no, we're going to continue to use those condoms. So,
And
yeah, go ahead.
the important part of this, though, is that your partner is not entitled to you. Your partner is not entitled to continue to have barrier-free sex with you
Just because we have been.
just because you have been.
Right.
You can change the standard. You can change the boundaries, the agreements at any point. And I think that's ultimately, that's kind of fundamentally what we're trying to say here,
Yes.
is that you can change these things. And again, it's important to understand that we're not talking about standards or boundaries here, or agreements, because those are all very healthy things to have in relationships, right? But there are also things that you need to communicate with your partner about, and you need to continue to make requests and stop making assumptions and stop feeling like you're entitled to certain behaviors or parts of their body or things that they say or share or do with other people simply because of your status in their life. Right? Further to that, I think it's also important to understand that we are not entitled to anything when it comes to another human being. And that includes friends, that includes family, that includes strangers on the street. I don't give a shit if a woman's walking down the street buck ass naked and just strutting her stuff. We are, as people who might find that attractive, we are not entitled in any way, shape, or form to touch her, to engage with her, to assume that she wants to have sex. Nothing, right? We're not entitled to that. Just because they're doing that doesn't mean that we are entitled to do things to her because of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're done.
Do we miss anything?
I don't think so. Let us know if you think we did.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. As always, in the comments, or reach out to us individually. Oh, I got a new website. Woo, 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 woo. So feel free to check it out. Go see the new website. Go check it out.
Absolutely.
And yeah, let us know if there's anything else that you want to talk about where this is concerned, because we're always open to that. Leave it in the comments if you're on YouTube, and if you're listening on a podcast somewhere, then shoot us a message. Let us know.
And I'll try and find that article about the descriptive prescriptive hierarchy thing and put it in the notes for the show.
Cool.
Okay. And remember,
choose love
and keep it kind.
We'd love to hear your comments, questions, or topic suggestions, and don't forget to subscribe.
And you're invited to join our Facebook group, Empowered Poly Relationship Support and Advice.
You can reach out to us on our websites at gregmillion.com
and at leannemillion.com,
or follow us on Instagram at @thegregmillion
and at Leanne Million.